What the hell is wrong with the Dallas Mavericks after 12 games? I'll try to answer that question, all coming up here on Inside the Mavs. Here we go. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your man, Kevin Gray. Appreciate you joining me here on Kevin Gray Sports on YouTube. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel here. And you can find me on X at Kevin Gray Sports. You catch me on DLLS Mavs 5 times a week, pregame, postgame, and podcast for DLLS Sports. I don't know what the hell's going on with the Dallas Mavericks, but you and I are going to try to figure it out here over the next little bit as far as our conversation is concerned, as the Mavericks, who are 12th in the Western Conference, at 5-7 after 12 games, have now lost 4 straight games by a combined total of 8 points after their latest defeat on the road to the Utah Jazz, where Luka Doncic inexplicably lost John Collins. He gets a basket to be able to give the Utah Jazz a lead. Najee Marshall misses a three-pointer at the buzzer that would have given the Mavericks a chance to win the game. And now a team that was 23-9 in the clutch a year ago made a run to the NBA Finals, taking out the Clippers and the Thunder and the Timberwolves along the way before ultimately losing to the Boston Celtics. Looks like a shell of itself so far through 12 games. And for the Mavericks and Mavericks fans, concern for sure after they smoked the homestand where they went 2-3 in a 5-game homestand and then lose to, of course, the Nuggets, the Warriors, where Stephen Curry went off for 12 points in the final 3 minutes and 10 seconds to take out the Mavericks. And then you lose a game to the Utah Jazz, who hadn't won a home game all season long. It was 2-8 going into the matchup. We say, Kevin, they have been dealing with injuries. Derek Lively just came back a couple of games ago when he was able to get on the floor to take on the Golden State Warriors. And then, of course, he started in the game against the Utah Jazz, but picked up 5 fouls in less than 10 minutes. But when he was able to stay on the floor, was actually pretty effective in the fourth quarter. Kyrie Irving missed a game against Utah as he's dealing with the shoulder injury. PJ Washington continues to remain out with a knee injury. Luka Doncic has already been dealing with a knee contusion and a groin strain. All that to say is, yes, there are some reasons why the Mavericks have struggled out of the gate, but namely it has been what has been on the floor and the lack of execution, especially in late game moments, versus anything that has had to do with injuries. A team that is now 1-6 in clutch games so far this year have nearly as many losses in the clutch as they did a season ago. A team going into the game against Utah that in the clutch has a defensive rating of 135. That's horrendous, boys and girls. And with a team that can't get a defensive rebound to save its life, the margin for error for this team right now is little to none. And then when you have the defensive breakdowns and mental mistakes that the Mavericks had against a Utah Jazz team that eventually took a 14-point lead going into the fourth quarter, you tried to have a comeback to give yourself a chance to win, which you were able to do using a 14-2 run to eventually take a lead. Klay Thompson even tying the game with just under 30 seconds left, and you still find a way to lose to Utah. So there's a myriad of issues that this team is dealing with, but at the same time, this team goes as its superstar goes. And while, yes, Luka Doncic is averaging over 29 points per game so far, it is the lack of defensive intensity that he's brought on that end that continues to haunt him and question whether or not he will become the complete player that all of us want him to be. There is no question that Luka is a fantastic offensive player, but the decision-making and shot selection that he's had toward the ends of ball games, save for the one against Utah because he was able to find an open Najee Marshall in the corner, and you'll take that shot every single time. He just simply airballed it and missed the shot to potentially win the game. There has been curious decision-making down the stretch, and this team right now, as we mentioned, sitting 12th in the West, has to start to come out of it because it doesn't get any easier. You're going to be taking on Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs over the weekend in a home road back-to-back. that starts with San Antonio, and then you play Oklahoma City on Sunday. And I don't want to hear when it comes to injuries, because every team in this league is dealing with a myriad of injuries, whether it be the Pelicans or the Suns or the Grizzlies, the Sixers. Any team that you want to name that's dealing with injuries right now, they have got to find ways to overcome it. And the Mavericks simply haven't been able to overcome their own adversity so far this year, getting off to poor starts where this team has been outscored on average by 3 points in the first quarter so far this year. That is inexcusable when you know you've got to get off to good starts, and the energy and focus has to be there at the beginning of games to give yourself a chance to win. Otherwise, you will continue to play from behind, much like they have done a lot of the time so far this year. Luka Doncic speaking after the game about the mental mistake and collapse that he had when trying to be able to defend John Collins, where you could see Sean Sweeney, the assistant coach and defensive guru on the bench, pointing out where guys need to go. Luka Doncic is falling asleep at the wheel. Here's what he had to say after the game was over with. Take a listen.
I was misunderstanding. I thought I was going to go hit, and Q thought, Grimes thought he was going to go hit. It was allowed, so we misunderstood the bench. That's on me.
And how about the final offensive possession?
What about it?
Just what happened? I mean, I know you had the ball at start and then give it up to Najee in the corner.
Yeah, we believe in those shots. It's a corner open three, so I'll take it anytime.
What's the most frustrating part about this stretch?
Losing. Simple as that.
You guys, I mean, as you well know, you made a huge run after the trade deadline last year to get as far as you got. Because it took so long for you to get going last year, does that give you any peace now, off to a slow start, just realizing how long the season is and how much time there can be?
Yeah, I mean, we basically won 4 straight by 2 points or 3. There's a lot of hope, but we just got to get better. We're getting beat especially in offensive glass. We can't get a rebound, so I think that's mostly the main reason why we're losing. We can't get a defensive rebound.
How tough is Najee?
Very tough.
What do you show you down the stretch, especially in the fourth quarter?
Like I always say, he's a great player. He's going to help us a lot, just playing his game, and we got to help him too.
Obviously, this is the first time you guys played without Kyrie this season. Just what was that like, and what did you see from the new starting lineup, Maxey, Grimes, and
Yeah, I think everybody played hard, but obviously it's Kyrie Irving, so obviously we're gonna miss him out there.
So obviously you can hear the frustration in Luka Doncic's voice after the game, saying, hey, it was a miscommunication when it came to what him and Quentin Grimes were communicating each other on that last play that saw John Collins streak to the basket, get the pass from Jordan Clarkson to be able to put in the dunk and eventually win the game for the Utah Jazz. But for this team that had as high expectations as it did coming into the season, a terrible start like this is going to be hard to dig out of. And I know that folks have been jumping in my mention saying, Kevin, it's only 12 games. They're 5-7. Some of these other teams in the West are going to come back to the pack. And while, yes, it is still a very long season, this team is still trying to figure out its new pieces with Klay Thompson, Quentin Grimes, and Najee Marshall. Time is of the essence here. And one of the things that I've discussed throughout the course of the offseason and into the beginning of the year is that you cannot afford to have a slow start in the Western Conference, where you have teams like Oklahoma City, like Phoenix, like Denver, and others who are looking to be at the top of the West all season long. The Mavericks now find themselves in an uphill climb even early on, 12 games into the year, where they've got to get back to 500 and then start to climb their way up the Western Conference standings. And this is not the kind of start that this team needed, given how important it was to make sure that emotionally and mentally you were locked in for every single game, because of the target that's been on the back of this team ever since they made it to the NBA Finals. And they have not handled that well so far through the first 12 games. More on what's ailing the Dallas Mavericks so far through the early portion of the season and how they can begin to turn things around, because they've got to start doing it soon. Otherwise, that hole will get digged deeper for them to try to climb out of. But before we get there, let's hear from a word from our sponsor of our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is sponsored by Aura. This year has seen a number of high-profile data breaches, raising serious concerns about personal information security. Dell suffered a breach exposing 3.9 million customer records, including sensitive personal information. AT&T disclosed 2 breaches, one affecting approximately 2.5 million customers and another one impacting 9 million customers. And finally, Ticketmaster experienced a massive customer breach affecting over 560 million customer records. But most alarming of all, just a few months ago, National Public Data announced that they had suffered a major breach potentially affecting every American. The incident compromised over 2.9 billion records used for background checks, including critical personal information such as full names, addresses, date of birth, phone numbers, and most importantly, social security numbers. It has been confirmed the members of the hacker group have released this sensitive information online for free. If you haven't been taking your online personal information seriously, now is the time to change that. You're more vulnerable than ever in today's digital landscape. Thankfully, I feel secure because I use Aura, today's sponsor. Aura monitors your personal data, including your social security number, across billions of data points like the dark web and public court records to alert you about potential identity theft. They also provide up to $5 million in identity theft insurance in case the worst ever happens. Plus, Aura offers a variety of other features to keep you safe online, including real-time alerts for data breaches, a VPN for secure browsing, data broker opt-out to stop companies from selling your personal information, a password manager to help you create and store strong passwords. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches. And if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to try 2 weeks for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. Appreciate you hanging out with us through our spot there. Thank you to today's sponsor of our video in Aura. The Mavericks scores 5-7 after 12 games after losing to the Utah Jazz. Now have an uphill climb to get back to 500 as they will look to do so when they take on the Spurs and then the Oklahoma City Thunder as they continue their schedule. And what they can do to start turning things around is finding the kind of consistency that you're starting to get, it appears, from Quentin Grimes and Najee Marshall in terms of the bench. They combined for 34 points in the game against the Utah Jazz. And yes, I know Najee Marshall missed the 3 that would have won the game for the Mavericks, but at the same time, you're getting better production from them. But one thing that has to definitely change for this Mavericks team is their ability to get after it on the defensive glass, particularly when it comes to Daniel Gafford, a player who added on 20 pounds of muscle over the summer, but at the same time still struggling on the defensive glass. Foul trouble besetting Derek Lively the second in the game against Utah. It is incumbent upon them to dominate in the middle and close out possessions for the Mavericks, which is interesting because when you look at the Mavericks going into the game against Utah, they were both top 10 in both offensive and defensive rating. But when it comes to the clutch moments in games so far this year, that has simply not been the case. Jason Kidd even tinkering with the lineup against Utah, sticking in their Quentin Grimes and Maxi Kleber to go alongside Derek Lively, Klay Thompson, and, of course, Luka Doncic. And the Mavericks have got to find a way to get more consistent on the defensive end of the floor because that is where things are going to start to turn around for them. Offensively, the Mavericks will eventually be okay, but Luka Doncic, when it comes to his efficiency so far this year, it hasn't been great. And when you're taking the amount of threes that Luka Doncic is taking, you've got to be able to start hitting those with a more consistency throughout the course of the year. Of course, last year, shot nearly 39% from 3, which was a career high for Doncic. So far this year, hasn't necessarily been the case. And Kyrie Irving, who's been sensational so far this year with his efficiency, not just overall from the field, but also from the three-point line, now dealing with injury himself. Things simply have not gone the way that Dallas has wanted it to. But what they can do is start showing the consistency in terms of energy and effort at the beginning of games, because this team should not be discussing energy, effort, and focus night in and night out. And personally, I'm sick and over the conversation. Yes, we can get on Luka about the defensive effort and the lack of consistency on that end of the floor, and that is going to continue to be a conversation because this Mavericks team will take its cues from its superstar. No matter how good he is offensively, he has got to participate, as Jason Kidd likes to say, on the defensive end, and the regression that we're seeing from him is inexcusable for a player now in his 7th year. That has to change immediately for this team to start looking better on that end of the floor. And it starts with its superstar leading the charge in that way. And once that begins to happen and the focus is there, this team should start to get better. But at the same time, when will that change start to happen? Because if it doesn't start happening soon, Jason Kidd likes to use what is the Christmas time area to determine what his team is and what they are not. What they are right now after 12 games is a team that gets off the bad starts, plays from behind, can't get defensive rebounds to close out defensive possessions, and is terrible in the clutch in the last 5 minutes of games and losing to teams that it has no business losing to. There's no reason why you should have lost the game at home to the Houston Rockets. There damn sure ain't a good reason why you should have lost the game to the Utah Jazz, who was shorthanded themselves without Walker Kessler in the lineup. They have shown, at least before the Utah game, that they can beat bad teams, but against good teams, they haven't been very good. Obviously, losing to the Suns a couple of times, losing to the Denver Nuggets, losing, obviously, to the Golden State Warriors. The only good team kind of that you have beaten so far is the Minnesota Timberwolves, and a team that has its expectations as it does. You've got to be able to beat down the bad teams that are on your schedule and then at least play 500 or close to that when it comes to the better teams in the Western Conference. And right now, the Mavericks simply aren't doing that. And you can level whatever blame that you want to when it comes to guys like Spencer Dinwiddie and Jaden Hardy and others who haven't necessarily been great, especially on the defensive end so far this year. There's a lot of blame to go around for this Mavericks team, and a team that has to find a way to climb out of it, because the further and further they slip down the Western Conference, the longer this inconsistency of play goes on, the harder it's going to be for them to find themselves getting into the top 6. And that's the part that upsets me the most. The sense of urgency that this team had to come into the seasons with, knowing how well that they played to get to the NBA Finals and how treacherous this road was going to be in the Western Conference. You could not afford to find yourself playing Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving the extended minutes that you are, and then think that they'll have enough gas that by the time you get to the end of the regular season, they can be able to make a deep run into the playoffs. And that is where we are, a team that's going to be scratching and clawing to get itself to the top 6 of the West. And even if you do, you've got to get to the top 4 so that you can at least have home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. And that seems like it is as far away now as we ever thought it could be when the season started. And a team that needs, in my opinion, to be able to have home court advantage, at least in the first round, because last year's road to the NBA Finals was a difficult one, even though they were able to play well extremely on the road. You can't ask for that every single year. You've got to give yourself some type of advantage. You say, Kevin, it sounds like you're panicking. It sounds like you're overreacting. I'm trying not to, because, again, we're 12 games in and there's still 70 games left. So there's still plenty of time to turn things around. But what the indicators are for this team, at least early on in the season, that hopefully is not a harbinger of things to come as the rest of the year goes on, is that they can't rebound, they can't play well in the clutch, and their superstar continues to be a revolving door on the defensive end that teams will continue to pick on night in and night out. And until he decides to participate and be better on the end of the floor, that portion for sure isn't going to change. That change has to begin now. Get healthy. With PJ Washington coming back hopefully here soon, you obviously now have Derek Lively back into the fold. He's got to remain out of foul trouble because of how important he is on the floor, especially on the defensive end with his length and versatility. And this team has got to start picking it up with its energy and focus at the beginnings of games, because they will continue to get punched in the mouth by these teams who are looking to make a statement night in and night out when they play the Dallas Mavericks. The target is squarely on this team's back, and you can go through any set of numbers, whether it be offensive rating in the clutch, offensive rating in the clutch, poor first quarter starts, defensive rebounding percentage. Any way that you slice it, the Mavericks aren't performing at the way that they are capable of, and they've got to find a way to start doing that. Otherwise, this team is in a lot of trouble going forward. But there is, again, I will reiterate, there is plenty of time to turn it around. But it starts now with their ability to do so, because if they don't, you and I will continue to have some unpleasant conversations when it comes to this team. But the Mavericks have the ability to turn it around. But they've got to start doing it with collective effort on the defensive glass, being better in the clutch, and most importantly, its superstar taking it seriously on the defensive end. And if that can happen, this team is capable of doing some good things during the regular season. We haven't seen it yet, but hopefully with the bench starting to turn things around with Quentin Grimes and Najee Marshall, that can happen once you get fully healthy with the return of PJ Washington as well. A lot of questions right now and not a lot of answers after the first 12 games as the Mavericks hit 5-7, 12th in the Western Conference after what is 12 games so far this year. I will be chronicling this, of course, all season long, not just here, but of course on DLLS Mavs with DLLS Sports. Really appreciate you joining me here on Kevin Gray Sports on YouTube. Again, like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Really appreciate you joining me here. And again, catch me on X at Kevin Gray Sports and also on DLLS Mavs on DLLS Sports 5 times a week, talking about your Dallas Mavericks and sometimes even the Cowboys as well. But who wants to really talk about them right now? Appreciate you joining me here on Inside the Mavs on Kevin Gray Sports. I'll talk to you later. Peace.